In a joint sitting of the US Congress, Donald Trump triumphantly read out a letter from Zelensky after the meltdown and the dramatic fight in the Oval Office. He announced reciprocal tariffs against India amid other countries, and he praised Pakistan. It's Trump's world, and we all seem to be struggling to make sense of it. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we try and decode the import of what Trump said and did not say in that address to the joint sitting of the US Congress. It was a triumphant Trump, able to recover quite swiftly, it seems, from what was the dramatic meltdown in the Oval Office in his meeting with President Zelensky of Ukraine. In that meeting, where Trump was accused by his critics of hectoring Zelensky, it's clear that Trump got his way. As Donald Trump addressed the Congress, he read out a letter from Zelensky signaling his willingness to sign the minerals deal, over which the entire fight and fracas had taken place to begin with in the Oval Office at the White House. There was some news for India too. Not unexpected, Trump has made his intent clear from the very first day in office. Trump announced reciprocal tariffs would kick in from the 2nd of April against India, among other countries. There was also unexpected praise for Pakistan for its help in securing the arrest of a terrorist who was responsible for the terror attack on the Kabul airport, in which several American servicemen lost their lives. Trump's trade war is triggering reactions around the world. Justin Trudeau himself, not on the best or the strongest wicket, has hit back at Trump using words like dumb to describe Trump's trade policy. Whatever Donald Trump is doing is going to have a ripple effect and echo across the world. But here in India, we are concerned primarily for what this might mean for us and our national interests. To try and decode Trump's impact on both India and the world, let me introduce our very distinguished panel of experts today. Trying to make sense of Donald Trump is never easy. I'm not sure that he knows what he's necessarily going to say next, but is there a method to his madness, metaphorically speaking, using that word? Well, certainly it was a very triumphant Donald Trump in that address. Joining me now is veteran diplomat, Ambassador Veena Sikri. Always a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am. Dr. C. Rajamohan, senior journalist, columnist, one of India's foremost strategic affairs experts, is with us. Good to have you with us, Raja. And Tavleen Singh, author and journalist and columnist, is with us. Always a pleasure, Tavleen. I want to actually start by playing out a clip of Trump where he basically announces, as expected, tariffs against India amid other countries. This is not an India-specific policy. This is his reciprocal tariff policy. He had made his intent clear on this even when Prime Minister Modi met with him, so it should come as no surprise. Maybe the timelines do. Let's take a look.
Countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them. And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many other ways to South Korea, but that's what happens. This is happening by friend and foe. This system is not fair to the United States and never was, and so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth.
All right, let's get comments. I'll start with you, Ambassador Veena Sikri, if I may. As I said, this is not unexpected. How concerned should we be? Much has also been made of the fact that this was a speech where India got the tariffs formally announced, and Pakistan got some unexpected praise for delivering a terrorist who was involved in the Kabul airport attack. I'm not trying to force a juxtaposition there. But as a diplomat, what did you make of the speech, particularly looking at the lens, looking at it through the lens of Indian interests?
Well, I think it was a very important speech for President Trump, no doubt about it. He was addressing the joint houses of Congress, and everybody was waiting very carefully and importantly for the speech. You can see that he got a huge amount of applause, and for various portions of his speech, the return of Mark Fogo and about the other young person, many aspects that shows his high standing and popularity. I think India has had a strong advantage through the visit of Prime Minister Modi to the US and the successful outcome of the visit, the very detailed discussions that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have had, which have put them on the same wavelength, put them on the wavelength of understanding each other's objectives. And I think that was the very important part of Prime Minister Modi's visit and the warm reception he received from President Trump. In follow-up of that, we are fully, geared up, as it were, to deal with all the important issues that President Trump has raised during the visit and, of course, subsequently. And tariff is a very, very big a part of it. And we know that in that very context, our Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is right now, as we speak, in the US and talking about this very same aspect, the bilateral trade agreement that has been promised between India and USA is an important part of the agreement between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, because rather than imposing these tariffs suddenly, the two sides have agreed that they will negotiate a bilateral trade agreement. They will look at the various aspects, which products are important.
But how do we reconcile that? Sorry, I just want a clarification. How do we reconcile that negotiation with a very specific date, the 2nd of April, that he's announced from this speech?
Well, the target of that bilateral trade agreement was already September. So it's not that it's going to be very far in the future, number one. So already we were gearing up. We know that it's going to happen. We must also see that this target of tariffs comes within the context of a bilateral agreement to raise the overall trade to $500 billion within the next 5 years. So I think we must also accept and respect that India and USA consider that both countries will remain large and important trading partners for each other. But within this $500 billion target, which, as you must know, is much more than a doubling, it's like almost a trebling. It's $130 billion bilateral trade in 2024. And it's a huge, which is a very big thing to do within 5 years. And the fact that both countries have set this target and Minister Piyush Goyal is already there to talk about it, means that both countries are serious about it. In the meanwhile, within this overall increased target, we have to negotiate that we are going to be serious about reducing tariffs. India's known tariff rate, average tariff rate, is very high at about 17%, and the US average tariff rate is 3.3%, which is, of course, much lower. We have to look at the ways in which we can do it. But America is willing to take on board Indian sensitivities, like, for example, on steel and aluminium, which, President Trump has imposed tariffs. He didn't mention India in any of those lists. But obviously, the reason being that it's going to be negotiated bilaterally, and maybe when Piyush Goyal is there, these items will come up for discussion. So I think we are seeing a situation where tariffs are going to be an important factor, but we are prepared to deal with it. I think we have to also recognize that President Trump's decision to impose tariffs has other objectives as well of his own. For example, Make in America. We have a Make in India program. He's announced the Make in America program, and he's told his big companies who are, say, for example, making cars in Mexico, if you want to make cars in Mexico, I'm going to put a tariff. So come back to America and make them here. So we must recognize that this is part of his bringing industry back to America and reindustrializing America, and at the same time bringing jobs back, and, as he says, his Make America Great Again overall.
So to that extent, Ambassador Sikri, you have no particular concerns about the announcement of the reciprocal tariffs, naming India in that speech, in that address to Congress, because he had made his intent clear, even with Prime Minister Modi standing next to him, and no alarm bells go off as such on that statement of Trump.
Well, alarm bells do go off, and that we have a time limit now. We have, by 2nd of April, be very clear on what it is that we are going to bring down and what it is that America wants us to bring down the tariffs on. And we also should have some kind of a pathway ready for increasing the will trade to $500 billion. And if we negotiate in that context, defense purchases from America, oil and gas purchases from America, we are balancing the trade, because the 500 billion has to be a balanced trade. It cannot be the present imbalance where India has a huge surplus of $45 billion with America. And we have time to negotiate. I think when Piyush Goyal comes back from the US within the next few days, he will have already with him a clear package that he will have to work on within India to make sure that when that is announced on the 2nd of April, it doesn't come as a shock to us.
So the concern is on timelines, not on the policy prescription itself. The devil is or God is, depending on how the negotiations go, in the detail. Now, zooming out beyond the trade tariffs, which I think Ambassador Sikri has done a very lucid job of explaining to us, there's the larger question of what Trump means for the world, what Trump means for India, what sort of foreign policy is going to be upended. We are living in a very different world, a very different way of negotiating, even talks, as we saw in what happened between Trump and Zelensky. Now, one of Trump's very triumphant moments in this address was to read out a letter from Zelensky. Everybody said, Tavleen, I remember you and Veena Sikri were on the program earlier, and you said he was just freelancing, and he was, everybody was taken aback, aghast even, at how he shouted at Zelensky. But guess what? He got his way. This is Trump reading out Zelensky's letter as he addressed the US Congress. Take a look.
Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful? It's time to stop this madness. It's time to halt the killing. It's time to end this senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides.
Tavleen Singh, I'll bring you in because you, I think, just a week ago said that Trump was a freelancer. He was making up his policy as he went along. He has got his way so far on Ukraine. He's gone from what could have been called a debacle in the Oval Office to a standing ovation. Zelensky has accepted his terms. If that was bullying, his bullying worked. Are you open to changing your mind about how Trump handled that meeting?
No, not at all. I think that it was a dreadful meeting, and it really showed him to be the bully that he is. So his policy is bullying. His policy is bullying, and he's not ready to actually take a principled stand on that, but to bully Ukraine, which he already did. And by the way, from what I hear from American sources, it was a setup. Poor Zelensky took the bait. What was Vance doing there? It was all, I think that they planned for this to happen. That's why the cameras were on and all that. And I still think it was shameful. I don't think that the president of America should behave the way that he did at that meeting. And, he's going to bully Zelensky and, sort of have a little kind of footsie game with Putin, who's his friend. And, they're going to get this, if he can get it done, well and good. But it's not, to me, it's I stand by my thing. I don't think that the president of America should ever behave the way that he did. But I want to say something about tariffs. Ambassador Sikri is very optimistic about, how we're going to handle that. I'm not so sure we're prepared. I don't know where you think that we're prepared for this. And also I want to say that I think it's a very good thing that he's doing this, because India has truly been very unfair in this kind of tariff situation. If we want to have, if there is a WTO, etc., we need to be a little bit more fair about what we get in. So I think that no harm will be done if he raises tariffs. Let's see what happens. But I don't think we're prepared at all. I think that we're now scrambling around because, you see, like a lot of people in India, they believe that Modi and Trump dost hain, they're friends, and so they work it out. That's not how it works with Trump. That's not how it works. He's really, when he said, and he does what he said he was going to do, America first, and he's got the cards in his hands. Let's see what happens. And at the moment,
when you say Veena Sikri is being overly optimistic, you are not optimistic, but you think India should cut tariffs.
Yeah, of course I do. Don't you? I mean, it's ridiculous. There are cars from American cars you can't sell in India because there's 100% tariffs. What if they start putting 100% tariffs on the stuff they take from us? And by the way, aluminium and steel, he didn't specifically say, oh, I'm not going to put tariffs on India on that. He said, generally, he's going to put tariffs. And, he is going to. And he's actually warned the American people. The price of eggs apparently has gone through the roof. You can't buy eggs. And he's trying to blame that on Biden.
Yeah.
But he is very serious about that. But, I totally stand by what I said on your show last time. What he did to Zelenskyy was really, shameful. Shameful.
So, Dr. Rajamohan, let me bring you in here. Trump, whether you like him or you hate him, is upending foreign policy, the conduct of foreign policy, the conduct of diplomacy, and the rules of the game. And Tavleen says it's bullying. Somebody else may think it's realpolitik. He had the cards in his hand. He played them. He told Zelenskyy that. He said, we have the cards. You don't have the cards. Guess what? He's been vindicated. Zelenskyy may have got an audience with the King of the United Kingdom, may have got a hug from Keir Starmer, but Zelenskyy has come around to Trump's terms, at least from the letter that Trump has read out. We don't know more yet. What does this do to how we understand diplomacy? What does a world leader think, or when the next time he or she walks into that Oval Office and the cameras are present? What does Trump's world mean to us here in India?
For all the talk about surprise, what Trump has done, I think he's not doing anything that he said he won't do. So in many ways, every one of the policies he's initiated is something he's talked about, his plans to implement them. Second, he was also, he had 4 years before, so we know something about his diplomatic style, which is bullying, which Tavleen pointed out. So my sense is, you're right in saying he's completely upending the world order at 3 levels. I think one is the idea of free markets, that the world will be run by globalization, all markets will be open for each other. So I think the argument for some time in the US has been the open markets has not helped American working people. Therefore, the US needs to reindustrialize, bring back the industry back to the US. And that China has gamed the global trading system. Therefore, they need to rework the system. So this is something which has been going back 40 years. This has been quite central to Trump's worldview. And now he's going full force, unlike in the first term. Second, I think he said that, he's saying that, there is no God-given mandate for America to take care of every problem in the world. Contrary to the liberals with whom we are so familiar with, that some of it's US responsibility. America must pay any price or bear any burden to do the right things in the world. He's saying, no such thing. That we're not going to spend our blood and treasure, American blood and treasure, to solve the world's problems. So he's been saying for quite some time, US should get along with Russia and China and look after itself. That's exactly what America first means. So I think in the case of Zelenskyy, you already talked about, he's saying that, that this war is not sustainable. I think he's absolutely right there. What Biden people did was to start something without demonstrating the capacity to finish it. They never gave Zelenskyy the full things he needed. Therefore, 3 years later, you're in a bad place. he's saying he's going to
But
stop.
if he closes this war, which is his big aim, is that Putin's win? I want to ask all three of you, and I'll start with you, Raja. If he does
I
end
don't
this
think
war,
it's not Putin's win. I mean, I think even Putin, how much choice does he have? I mean, that he's eager to look. 3 years of war has devastated Russian economy. Russia thought it's a 1-week picnic in Ukraine. Now we're into 3 years. So I think for Putin too needs a break. And my sense is he'll be quite welcome it. And my sense is the ceasefire is coming pretty quickly. And soon after, a summit meeting between President Trump and President Putin is also likely to take place. So I think what we're going to see is the change in the way US deals with other major powers. Not in this fundamental confrontation with everyone, that it is willing to play the game both with US, China, and India, and whoever is willing to do, and telling the allies, look, guys, you take care of yourself. If you don't want to take care of yourself, don't. Uncle Sam is not Uncle Sucker, as the defense secretary once famously said.
Uncle Sam is not Uncle Saka, but where does that leave everybody else? Just quick comments on whether this would be a win for Putin. It'll be a win for Trump, definitely, if he manages to end this war. But, there are world leaders, Ambassador Sikri, like Trudeau, for example, who are basically calling Trump a Putin stooge. And I'll play out that clip of Trudeau in just a moment. But quick comments on, I think Raja says that ceasefire, the summit, this is coming. Russia, Ukraine is going to end, and Trump is going to take credit for closing it. His opponents at home and abroad are calling him a stooge of Putin, and they say that the closing of the war leaves Putin with a win. Do you agree?
Well, I think, Barkha, that certainly it has been Trump's declared aim to bring this war to an end. We must understand it's part of his manifesto. He had declared that he's going to do it at this and the Hamas-Israel war. And he's going to fulfill his mandate. We just saw what he said on the Panama Canal. Now, BlackRock has already taken over those companies. The Hong Kong-based companies, Hutchison and so on, they've all been taken over by BlackRock. And what he said on Panama Canal has come true, despite Panama's all protestation. So he is going to steamroller his way into fulfilling his mandate. And I think on the Ukraine-Russia war, he's absolutely right, because it was the agreement between Ukraine and USA in November 2021, which actually specifically mentioned the taking on Russia and the war, which actually forced Putin to go in. And America now recognizes that rather than insisting at all times on a unipolar world, they are willing to make America great again, so that they deservedly get that position. But now in the meanwhile, they have to live in a multipolar world. And we must think of another aspect also, that if Putin is able to work with Trump on ending the war, the Russia-China relationship also goes in for a reset. And I think that's very important for the world and certainly for Russia, because Russia is very uncomfortable in the second rung position in the China-Russia setup. And now with Russia having got the support of Putin on ending the war, is going to be very big. And I think it's natural for Russia and the European Union, for all of Europe to work together rather than to be at loggerheads as they were in World War I and World War II. So I think both those world wars showed us that Europe has to live together. They have to learn to work together. And I think this is an important message, despite that summit that Prime Minister Keir Starmer had in London, bringing all those leaders together, saying we are going to take them on, we've got $800 billion and whatnot. No, I think that's all very impractical and impossible without US support. So I fully support what President Trump is doing on ending the Russia-Ukraine war, and I think it will happen.
I have many questions on China, so I'm going to address them separately. But I just want to, before I bring in Tavleen, what Ambassador Sikri is talking about is the BlackRock-led group is now going to take over 90% of the Panama Ports Company, and Trump has said that is the beginning of America reclaiming the canal. By the way, if we are saying Trump is going to do everything he said he's going to do, he has also said that one way or the other we're going to get Greenland. So I just want to put that on the table. God only knows what's happening and coming next. We don't know. Tavleen, Putin, I know you're not a fan. That's an understatement. And you do believe that this will leave Putin with the last laugh.
Yeah, well, Ambassador Sikri is an Indian bureaucrat, and Indian bureaucrats have a very cynical worldview until it comes to India. Let's see how you react when Pakistan walks into Kashmir or China walks into Kashmir and Arunachal Pradesh. And then we're going to say, oh, no, you can't do that. I believe that there were rules set after Yalta, and that those rules should apply until there's a new set of rules. I really don't think that Putin, can be in any way supported in what he did. He was a dictator. He marched into a democratic country and destroyed it virtually. I mean, if we're going to say that everything it's fair game, we can go in that Pakistan and China can collude to take over China can take over Taiwan, and they can collude to take over the Kashmir Valley and Arunachal Pradesh. What are we talking about? Would we react the same way? No, the Indian bureaucrat then would start having all sorts of other, no, 1 minute. The Indian bureaucracy has been cynical about the Russia-Ukraine thing from day one. They have not at one point said what Putin did was wrong. Let's at least begin with that. What Putin did was wrong, and he has caused terrible suffering that would have been avoided. Why didn't he negotiate then if he's so keen on negotiating? Why wasn't there a negotiation before the war? Why not?
Okay.
You could have said, I don't want, I'm frightened of Ukraine going into NATO and all that. So I don't buy any of that sort of thing. And please, let's think about India, right? We are vulnerable on this.
Okay.
China wants to change our borders from the beginning of India's independence. Are we going to deal with it? So, China taking over Tibet is fine. Everything is fine.
So before Veena Secretary responds to that, Raja, if your take, Ambassador Secretary, I'll get you to come in. Just Dr. Raja Mohan's take as well. I think the point Tavleen is making is that if the war ends on these terms, Zelensky is now going to sign the minerals agreement without any security guarantees. I think the argument she's making is that Putin's expansionist ambition would have succeeded. And tomorrow, once you accept that as a sort of as a principle that can be violated, tomorrow, what will we say when China comes and takes our territory?
I think it's part of a long record. I mean, you can call it cynical, realistic, because Russia is India's friend. I mean, going back to Hungary, going back to Czechoslovakia, going back to Afghanistan, India would not criticize Russian actions, while it would criticize the Western actions. I mean, that's part of our contradictions that are part of our history. And I think there's no denying it. And I think the real problem, what Tavleen is pointing out is this. If Russia gets away with gaining territory by use of force in the heart of Europe, what happens to China's claims on South China Sea, on Taiwan? Here, I think we have to stop and reflect on one thing. If Trump's attitude is, look, I'm far away, I'm not affected by what happens in the territorial changes, I'm going to deal with the big boys and look after my own interests. That's what he's saying. Now, I think we are hearing some disturbing notes in the case of Asia. The new Undersecretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby, has said, look, Taiwan is not an existential threat to the United States. He's saying that, look, US allies in Asia, just as in Europe, must look after themselves. So I think this is going to put us all. I mean, if Taiwan falls tomorrow, then India is next, the Himalayan battlefield between China and India. Therefore, I think that question, if use of force to change territorial status quo is legitimized, India will have to now deal with, not because it's a principle and countries will follow principles, but the fact is a victory for Russia and Europe would also be seen as a victory for China and Asia. Therefore, I think the consequences of what happens in Ukraine to China's policy in the region, I think is going to be an issue. And for us, the real policy issue is how do we deal with potential freedom for China in dealing with its territorial issues, whether it's against Philippines, Taiwan, South China Sea, and India. So this is going to be a pressing question for us.
It's an excellent point, and I want to discuss China separately. But on principle, what you're saying is that if the US takes the view that it is going to be hands-off on any changes to territorial status quo around the world, because it's not America's problem, then sooner or later, we India could find ourselves also in a place of vulnerability where there will be no global pressure that we'll be able to mount, because it's now become an accepted norm that powerful countries can go in and do what they want to. So, Ambassador Sikri, I want you to respond to both of these arguments. Tavleen saying bureaucrats are just cynical except when it comes to us. Raja saying that it will come to us if America remains so hands-off.
Look, first of all, bureaucrats are not cynical. Bureaucrats are pragmatic and realistic. And we have to base ourselves on our own experiences, on India's experiences. with various countries, how they've dealt with us, how they've supported us, how the bilateral relationship has worked and developed and benefited both sides. So please, let's take into account the history of what has been happening in India's relationship with all countries of the world, one by one. India follows a policy of strategic autonomy, and it has served us very well. And I think we are fully within our rights to follow that policy. And it is a policy respected now by all countries of the world. And many countries have gone also talking about doing strategic autonomy of their own. So please, I think it's not cynicism at all. Secondly, I think let us not look only at the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine on this particular date. Please, let's look at the history of it. Let's look at the Minsk agreements, which were never followed, which were agreed in 2014. Please look at the agreement by America given to Russia, the guarantee that NATO will not move an inch eastward after the reunification of Germany. Please look at all the list of broken agreements and how Putin had made a statement on this much, much earlier, saying how their red lines, he had pointed out to Russian red lines. He's written wrong articles on the history of Ukraine. He's written wrong pieces on how they are being threatened by Ukraine, by NATO moving rapidly eastward, and Ukraine being absorbed into NATO would be absolutely unacceptable to Russia. So please, let's look at the history of this conflict and let's not look at the outcome of when Russia invaded Ukraine. That was just an outcome of this conflict of many decades of non-fulfillment of guarantees given by the Western powers to Russia, and that how he was actually forced into doing this because it was an existential threat for Russia. So I think we have to recognize these factors. And you talk about Crimea. Now, Crimea was always a part of Russia. It was given by Khrushchev to Ukraine because Khrushchev happened to be from Ukraine, and he just gifted it to the Crimea to Ukraine, and saying, okay, now you take it as a part of you. That doesn't mean that historically Crimea was a part of Ukraine. It was always a part of Russia. So I think we have to look at the history in this regard. We have to look at the history of how the bilateral relationship, the multilateral relationship between the NATO powers and Russia, the Warsaw Pact, of course, evaporated. Russia, the way the relationship developed, and specifically there was an agreement in 2014. Was never fulfilled.
But I think the point being made is it's not only about Russia and Ukraine. It is about the Americans now taking the position that what's happening in the rest of the world is not our problem. And if that means territorial lines can be redrawn, so be it. We're not going to get involved. I think that's what, at least that's what Raja is flagging.
No,
right?
I think that yes, it is true that the President Trump is hinting at that, and his key members like Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz have been giving indication of that. But we do know that, for example, President Trump is very concerned about counterterrorism. He's very concerned about radicalization. He's already ordered bombings in South Sudan. I think other places where he is worried about the radicalized groups and others wanting to take over the country. So it's not that President Trump has changed that policy. He's always going to be on these issues. And you mentioned Pakistan, for example. We know that Pakistan is terrorism central. And that is why, just like Osama bin Laden was hiding there, this guy, Kabul airport bomber.
But he's praising them. He's not saying he was hiding there. He's saying, hey, well done, Pakistan, right?
No,
he's saying, well done, Pakistan, thank you.
You gave him back to us, just like after Osama bin Laden was killed. I mean, it was well known that Pakistan has helped the Americans to come and get Osama bin Laden because that was part of the whole strategy.
Okay. Let me get reactions. Tavleen and Raja both want to come in. Tavleen, go ahead, and then Raja. Yeah.
Did not help bin Laden, Madam Ambassador. They had to send a Black Hawk expedition, and Pakistan was kept out of the loop. Pakistan was hiding Osama. In this case, they have done a different thing. I mean, you cannot say Pakistan colluded with America to give them Osama bin Laden. I can't believe you said that. Why was there a need for a midnight raid on that house and Osama taken out, his body thrown into the ocean? If Pakistan was cooperating, where was the need for all this? He was hiding in a Pakistani cantonment. So, I don't agree with that. But, what really worries me is Putin is not just, expansionist. Look what he's doing within Russia. Look what he did to Alexei Navalny. I mean, just look, if Trump is going to overlook all these things in the interest of just, recreating a world order in his own idea, he's going to overlook everything then. He will overlook every dictator's atrocities. And, to me, that's a very scary world that we're going to end up living in.
Okay, on Pakistan, on Putin, Raja, and then Veena, and then I have to take last comments. So Raja, go ahead. Raja, that praise for Pakistan, did it strike you as peculiar?
No, not really. I think Pakistan has been quite desperate to reconnect with Washington. I mean, if you see last 4 years of the Biden administration, there was not even a phone call from President Biden to the Prime Minister, whoever it is, runs Pakistan. And after Imran Khan visited Trump in 2019, the relationship has actually just gone down the tube. And I think once Afghanistan fell off the map, there's been very little contact. So I think Pakistan has been eager, looking for an opportunity to reconnect. And my sense is they've taken this is a good old tactic. If you remember, for 30 odd years, whenever America wanted a terrorist, they'll pick out one from the bag and say, here is one, take it. This is the guy you wanted. So I think this is an old familiar book, but I don't think Pakistan is going to come back in any serious way into the strategy that I don't see. As you said, you saw Trump tell Modi that in the press conference, Bangladesh is yours. So if his idea of spheres of influence, if he says he's willing to let East Asia to China, Eastern Europe to Russia, he's saying, look, if India wants to assert its sphere of influence in Asia, in South Asia, go ahead, be my guest. But the question is whether you have the capacity. So that's a different story. So I think Tablin is right. Look, the change is Washington is saying, look, we're not going to mess around with the internal affairs. You're a Democrat, not a Democrat, of no concern to me. I want to look after myself on trade. Then I'm willing to cut deals with whoever is willing to make deals with me. And I think that's a new reality, how countries adapt to it. That's a part of the new situation. So I won't be worried about Pakistan, really. Pakistan is really not even on the radar in terms of the big issues of the world today. And in fact, they're trapped between US and China as well. The conflict between US and China doesn't give them much space to operate.
So let's leave our last comments for what happens if Trump cuts a deal with China. But before we come back for last comments on that, because that's a very interesting, because that could take away some of India's leverage with the United States of America. And with Trump, he's a deal maker. If he can make a deal with Putin, he can definitely make a deal with the Chinese, and what happens in that context. But before we get those last comments, Trump's tariffs, Trump's comments are creating ripple effects, are creating or provoking reactions around the world. And he clearly enjoys needling Canada almost more than any other country. For us in India, it's amusing because there's no love lost for Trudeau, but Canada is more than just Trudeau. However, Trudeau had this to say about Donald Trump.
So today, the United States launched a trade war against Canada, their closest partner and ally, their closest friend. At the same time, they're talking about working positively with Russia, appeasing Vladimir Putin, a lying, murderous dictator. Make that make sense. Canadians are reasonable, and we are polite, but we will not back down from a fight. Not when our country and the well-being of everyone in it is at stake. At the moment, the U.S. tariffs came into effect in the early hours of this morning, and so did the Canadian response. Canada will be implementing 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
Okay, now Canada and the US are playing out their own little game there, their own little angst. But the larger question for us in these last comments is what happens if Trump cuts a deal with the Chinese? Raja, I'll start with you. Sorry,
there are serious.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right now, the contradictions between US and China are also serious. You have actually a series of tariffs being put on China, a whole lot of technology restrictions on China. So in many ways, he's continuing the policy of Biden administration of confronting China. But at the same time, Trump, as they did in the first term, wants an economic deal with China, and he's going to do that deal at some point. So for us, I think it's not to believe that, look, somebody else will come and save you. And I think the problem will be there for Japan, South Korea, and other allies. I think we need to be prepared today for a world in which the relationship between US, Russia, and China will continue to alter. So the question is, how do we use this interim period to strengthen ourselves so that we can stand up and defend ourselves against China? And that would require actually doing more with the US, more with Russia. My sense is Trump might say, look, he might cut a deal with China, but he'll also tell you, you want to buy more weapons to defend yourself? Yeah, come and look into my store. I'm willing to quite give you F-35 or anything else you want. So I think it is your capacity to negotiate with a complex world rather than sitting there and saying, look, the good guys will stand with us and the bad guys can be isolated. That world is gone.
Yeah, that world has gone, Tavleen. Are you being too theoretical? I mean, that world that you're invoking, this rules-based order, it doesn't exist. And maybe it never existed. The Americans were mired in all sorts of hypocrisy. Even when it came to democracy, I mean, look at their defense of Saudi Arabia before Saudi Arabia reformed, because there was an oil relationship there. So, this values-based order, this rules-based order. Look at Afghanistan. Look at what's happening to women there. Nobody's talking about values anymore.
Of course, there are, there's a problem with democracy. There's a problem with democracy staying together. But there is a certain idea of the world which believes in the values of liberal democracy, of boundaries, of not invading small countries, etc. And, Trump is going to upend that completely. And we really have to be prepared for it. I'm actually... the thing that concerns me the most is, except that I think that, things will change if the deal looks as though it's not going through. He's a deal maker. He'll change his, rules as he goes along. But I'm actually very worried that the beneficiary of all this is going to be countries like China and Russia. I don't think India benefits. And I think we really, Raja's right, we really better get our act together, and try and deal with with a whole new world.
Yeah. So, Ambassador Sikri, do you agree that the beneficiaries of Trump's deal making are likely to be Russia and China? And if he does cut a deal with the Chinese, then, I'm not saying India and US are only based or built on a countervailing power to China, but that's certainly been a factor. And if that factor goes away or weakens, what happens? Last comment from Ambassador Sikri.
Well, I think that we have to see what he's going to do with China in two contexts. I think during his campaigning, when he was spelling out his manifesto, he was much tougher on China, much, much tougher. But when he are saying that, it's the influence of Elon Musk, who has great business interests in China, and that is sort of moderating his views on China. And now he is talking about a deal with China. But I think China is being very feisty. I mean, today, for example, when Trump has imposed tariffs on China, the Chinese embassy in Washington has given out a very strong statement, very similar to what Prime Minister Trudeau is saying. We are going to fight to the end, and we are going to take on this fight, and we're not going to be step down, etc. So I think that you are going to see on this aspect a certain amount of give and take. So Trump is raising the stakes, as it were, by putting these tariffs, and he's going to see what China is going to do. But I think strategically, a lot is going to depend on, for example, how Trump deals with Quad, for example. And so far,
right.
Trump has shown that he is very interested in Quad. And I think the expectation is that around September, he may well be in India for the Quad summit. And now if Trump is going to keep up the interest on Quad, and he's going to, also look at AUKUS and all those strategic security-based issues dealing with China. I think China is going to still be a very worried person. I think look at, for example, the Philippines' relation with China. It was, hunky-dory a few years ago, but now Philippines is taking on China very aggressively. And even ASEAN is worried about China. There was recently a meeting of the defense ministers of ASEAN, and they are worried about what China is doing, and they're worried about the increasing threat from China. So I think that what Prime Minister Trump, if he's going to keep up his word on Quad, and certainly our Prime Minister and President Trump did discuss Quad in a very big way, and what they're going to do about it, how it's going to work out. So I think if President Trump keeps up his interest on Quad, it shows that he is interested in maritime security, and we do know that maritime security is very important for global security in those areas in that part of the world. So let's see what he does. Today he's focused on tariffs and nothing but tariffs. Let's see what China. And his security concerns are not going away. I don't think so. On Quad, he is going to show equal amount of interest, and he is letting India, what he said about India. Yes, you look after Bangladesh, etc. That was an important point, that India we have to ourselves gear up. We have to ourselves strengthen our internal and external defenses. We have to ourselves strengthen our economy so that we can take on this bigger role in our region and others to do it. This is very important. We have to stand up and meet the challenge, and I think we are doing that. I think all the the proposals for Make in India, Elon Musk is himself saying that he's going to come to India, and even President Trump said, "Oh, this is very unfair that Elon Musk is going to India, etc., to set up a factory." So obviously, India is an attractive destination, and more companies are coming from China to India. Production is going up here, but we have to do a lot more to be able to take up this challenge in a quicker and better way. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the bottom line that we can all agree on, whether, a two-pronged growth strategy, one to strengthen your economy and the other to strengthen your strategic capacity. I mean, there's no two ways about that. India needs to follow that aggressively. By the way, in terms of what China has said after Trump's announcement of tariffs, if US wants war, be ready to fight. That said, Zelensky was shouting at Trump was shouting at Zelensky, and here's Zelensky with a letter that Trump is reading from. So I think what we can all agree on is all bets are off. Nothing is predictable. Stand in defensive mode, ready to fight if you need to, and be more relevant. And the two ways that you can be relevant is through your markets in your economy and through your strategic capacity. We leave it there. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sikri, Tavleen Singh, Dr. C. Rajamohan. Thank you, namaskar, and to our audience, see you tomorrow. Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.